Okay, day 3, the end of the test match between England and Zimbabwe, and it's time once again to ask George. Okay, so Ron Martin asks, first up, should England be concerned about the makeup of their pace attack with far stronger opposition coming up?
I think they've just won in 2.5 days by an innings of 45. I mean, can't ask for much more than that, can you? But at the same time, of course, you make a point. I don't think any seam bowler enjoyed that wicket. Not any of them in the match. So I hope that no one's judged too harshly on it. Does Sam Cook get another game? I just don't know. He didn't have the most fantastic game, but I thought he bowled better than his figures suggest. But the fact is that, Chris Wokes is making his comeback. Matt Potts is available. Jofra might be available fairly soon. So there are always going to be other people pushing. I hope he gets another go personally. But he didn't absolutely nail it. Fair?
That's absolutely fair. I mean, for what it's worth, Ben Stokes gave quite a ringing endorsement in the press conference just now, didn't he?
He did. Yes, he did. And I did think he bowled quite well. Look, if there were concerns, he bowled a couple of bouncers that were pulled in front of square before. He has been rated the slowest seamer, specialist England seamer, in a test in England since 2006.
That was John Lewis, by the way.
Yeah, Zimbabwe batters did come down the wicket to him. I've got a nice stat in my piece about 12 of the 13 most recent one-cap wonders have all been specialist bowlers for England. There are things that may be slight concerns, but if he plays against India, he's going to obviously have a much tougher batting lineup to bowl at. And I think some of the pitches in that series are going to be really flat. Manchester, Lords, and Birmingham in particular, I'm expecting they're going to be flat. But if he plays the first test at Leeds, he might be just the guy.
Yeah, I mean, if he is presented with many more pitches than this, do you see a future for him in Test cricket?
Gus Atkinson had a fantastic year last year, right? And he struggled every bit as much. I don't think Josh Tongue had moments, but there were times today where he was hit around with some abandon. So I wouldn't leap to that conclusion. I could see why some might, but I don't know. I'd feel a bit uncomfortable with that. But they did win in 2.5 days by an innings of 45. And for those of us who are old enough to have seen the whitewashes, blackwashes, brownwashes, beaten by chicken farmers, never won a T20 against European opposition. That's the stat, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think. Just take the enjoyment of the win, I think.
Okay. Ollie Daniels asks, has there ever been a captain who has improved the performance of a player more than Ben Stokes has shown for sure?
It's a really interesting question, and I suppose the one that you jump to straight away is Brealey and Botham in '81. But the fact that you can even compare it and talk about it is testament to the sense of your question. And you're right, he is obviously inspiring him, giving him the confidence. And I thought he'd bowled really, really well. Again, we're going to say again and again, aren't we? You've got to get it in perspective. Those hundreds in the first innings, we know that it was against fairly weak opposition. And we know that he's just taken a 9-4 against a modest, relatively batting lineup. I thought he bowled really well today, and I thought he's got better as the game's progressed. You can see him growing confidence, and you can see he's got weapons. It's just, again, just remember he's 21. I mean, it's incredible, this story that we're seeing unfold. Who knows what's going to happen? I genuinely couldn't tell you. It's just about possible. He's still playing in 20 years. He's got 750 test wickets. It's just about possible, isn't it? Equally, India and Australia coming up. Maybe that ends his career. I don't know how it's going to unfold. But I don't think that their strategy of backing him, seeing the raw potential, bearing with it, I don't think it's unreasonable in the circumstances. Not saying that he's necessarily the best person for every game, but they feel they have to bear with him to help him build and learn his game. And I think you can probably understand where they're coming from with that. And anyway, Stokes clearly captains debutants well. He's a sympathetic captain. We've seen quite a lot of people come into the team and do well in their first games. Definitely take some credit for that.
Right, moving more on to Zimbabwe, really. Jack Rule asks, how do we make sure that Zimbabwe remain relevant and don't get pushed to the side of the international game? Yes, they aren't as strong as they were, but unless big nations play them, how will they remain relevant in Test cricket?
Well, James is more of an expert on this stuff than me, and wrote a very good exclusive story, I think, last night about the reciprocal tour that is being talked about, England going to Zimbabwe. And before you answer, I would just say, credit to the ECB where it's due. They have paid for this tour. It's not necessarily what always happens, but they've invested, I think it was 150 grand, wasn't it, in Zimbabwe cricket to encourage them to do this. So they are doing the right thing in that regards. More to do, no doubt, but Zimbabwe aren't the only country that needs a bit of help. Nearly all of them do, actually. But credit where it's due for doing that. Do you want to answer more fulsomely on Zimbabwe?
Well, I guess it's a mixture of things. It's a mixture of cricket things and a mixture of commercial things. And I think we saw today, and we'll come on to it, but we've shown that there's the interest for cricket in Zimbabwe. Look at the fans here. I mean, they're absolutely all over it, weren't they? So there's that, but also there's the cricketing side of it. The teams, other countries lose money if they arrange certain series. So that, obviously the administrators are thinking that, but it certainly looks hopeful that there'll be some sort of bilateral tour to Zimbabwe in the future, by England at least.
Just you've got to be a wee bit careful with this stuff. I'd love there to be two divisions, promotion and relegation, but you've got to remember the financial necessities here. That obviously it is the big series against, bless you, the big series against India and Australia that make money, and you've got to be respectful of what the broadcasters want. And it is absolutely true that tests against Ireland and Zimbabwe won't sell in the same way. You just have to be aware of that, because the whole edifice falls down if you haven't got the money to support it. But you could have a sort of hybrid system where you've got two divisions, promotion and relegation, and still the big series. You could do that. Or you could accept the benefit of scarcity value and shorter series. Personally, I think England going to India and playing 5 test series isn't a great plan. They're generally not that competitive. I personally think that 3 would be better, and maybe, but that's a controversial view, and other views out there which are equally valid, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's a balancing act, isn't it? Because the scarcity value of this fixture, there's been a lot of interest, I think, in this game. And if it was just England or India or Australia on a doom loop, I mean, people would love the cricket, but it would get a bit boring after a while. So it's a balancing act, isn't it? Between the series that make money, but the contests that get the broadcasters interested to bring the money in.
Well, I think we've been there a couple of times recently. I think, when India and Australia come to England, it's very competitive. England may win, they may not, but it's very competitive.
Yeah, sure.
But when England go to those countries, it sometimes isn't. The last Ashes tour was horrendous, and actually the one before that and the one before that were great. So is that helpful? Is that helpful for the brand of the Ashes long term? I don't know. Personally, I don't think it is, and so there would be a way of doing things differently. But you'd have to have administrators who would take a long-sighted view, and of course, there's the huge elephant in the room, which is India-Pakistan.
Absolutely. And sort of in a similar vein, but slightly different, Scott Wellstead asks, they've been well beaten here, but there have been full member sides that have performed worse than this in England, and Zimbabwe were a man down too. So surely they've justified being invited again earlier than 2047, which is obviously the last gap we had.
Yeah, I mean, that absolutely makes a point. I mean, look, I wrote a piece that an awful lot of people have criticised, almost certainly without reading it, because in the very third paragraph, it makes mention of 1989 here, where Australia batted through the first day without losing a wicket. I think they scored something like 606 and beat England by an innings of 180. And my point was that no one was saying that, England and Australia shouldn't play Test cricket anymore. Fox probably were, if you fair. But so yeah, the point you make is absolutely valid. And the point that I made in that piece was that if you want Zimbabwe to be better, you've got to encourage them, and this is part of that. And yeah, you're absolutely right. England have been on the end of all sorts of bad results over the years. So you get it in perspective, and you see that what Zimbabwe are trying to do is develop their Test cricket, and that is admirable, and they need support to do that. Now, at the moment, they're hosting these games and losing money on Test cricket. World cricket is awash with money. It tends to float, goes to the top, and there needs to be, you all know what I'm going to say already, there needs to be a different revenue model, and it needs to be a bit more selfless. And if it isn't selfless, the whole thing will fall down, because it will just be England playing India and Australia again and again in the loop. And I think people will eventually get a bit tired of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I suppose, Ireland has played a couple of one-off test matches here in more scene-friendly conditions, and that brought them into the game, whereas Zimbabwe were in very, this is as flat as you get in England, isn't it? And it's, so I suppose perhaps the gap was brought a bit closer between England and Ireland in those games, whereas here, the conditions perhaps mitigated against that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. In 2019, in Ireland bowled England out for 85.
Yeah.
I think England then bowled Ireland out for the odd.
Yeah.
But you get the picture. I mean, there was some element of jeopardy in the game at various stages, and there wasn't really here. There's no way around it. And I don't think that you can rely on people saying, "Oh, the spectators will keep coming." I do think you've got to be mindful of all that stuff. So there's all these different things that they're trying to balance. But as a one-off test, it's okay. And I hope that they keep encouraging them.
Will Cooling asks, can we take a moment to celebrate the multiracial Zimbabwe team of fans who showed the world the true face of Zimbabwe at Trent Bridge? Never a friendlier country you'll find.
Well, I haven't been there, and you have.
I haven't been there either.
Oh, I thought you had.
No, I haven't, no.
Well, I've not been there, but yes, I hear this a lot. And you don't look. The point you make, Will, is spot on. I would say that I think you make the point of the sort of multiracial Zimbabwe fans, multiracial English fans as well, England fans as well, of course. That's one of the best things I'd say about watching cricket in England and Wales. And actually, when England and Wales hosts major tournaments, it's one of the really good things. One of the bad things is the weather, which is a huge impediment at times. That 2019 World Cup was a week or so, wasn't it? The games in Bristol were almost completely washed out, but every side in the tournament had its own supporters there. There's no segregation or anything like that. Anything you might get at football or anything like that. Never been any need for that. Hopefully there never will be. And it will, wasn't it? Will's absolutely right to point that out. Something to be celebrated.
And actually, this is just anecdotal, just what I noticed, but there was quite obviously a lot of black Zimbabwean fans here and a lot of white Zimbabwean, quite a few white Zimbabwean fans, and the general camaraderie that you noticed between the two was there. They were sitting together, they were mingling together, mingling with England fans. I think a lot of England fans bought Zimbabwe jerseys, so I think there's been a genuine sort of. The administrators, I think, will have noticed the interest from the Zimbabwean fans in this game, and they'll have realised that actually, if there is a prospect of a tour to Zimbabwe at some point, it's not just built on philanthropy; it's built on something possibly a little bit stronger than that. And who knows? I mean, do you think Zimbabwe could give England the game in their own conditions? I think.
Well, maybe I don't. On the evidence of this,
no. But,
it wasn't massively encouraging. But if the economic model was slightly different, all those players that you've been writing about who aren't playing for Zimbabwe right now, maybe would. I don't know whether Sam Curran want to do that, but you know what I mean. There are lots of players out there. Young Michael Booth. There are a lot of good players in the world who have made career choices completely reasonably, by the way. No iota of criticism, because financially they've had to. But if you had a different model, that could change, and then maybe. But look, the only way they're going to get better is by playing. And it's great that they've been encouraged to do that. And Will's point is, there's obviously been lots of, I've spent a couple of years writing about the inclusion issue and lots of issues, lots of room for progress. But you're absolutely right to mention a good day for cricket, and one of the good things about cricket.
And on that note, probably a good time to finish. Thank you for being with us this test match. Goodbye.